Today, we are talking all about wealth, how it helps you make a bigger impact in the world, in your community, in your business, and how to build it in a way that really feels aligned with your purpose, your values, and the life that you want to build. Last season, on episode 13 of this podcast, I chatted with Gina Knox, who's a money coach, and she's actually my money coach. And we talked a lot about money mindset and broader issues around the idea of building wealth and what that means. Today, I'm chatting with Kristin Printon on kind of a more practical approach to wealth building. There's a lot of really juicy practical nuggets in this episode, a lot of things that you can learn as an entrepreneur. Kristin is a wealth management certified professional and an accredited investment fiduciary. Say that 10 times fast. And she's developed a national financial planning practice called Moxie Wealth. She's an advocate for financial planning without judgment, as you'll see in this episode. And her goal is to be your financial advocate, not your financial critic. She's passionate about empowering her clients to make informed decisions with financial confidence and clarity. Kristin is honored to have been recognized for her hard work, dedication to the industry, community involvement, and leadership through several awards. She really knows what she's talking about. And so it's really my pleasure to introduce Kristin to the show. Hey there, beautiful human. Welcome to the Bold Women in Business podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Honeyman, a content marketing, branding, and web design expert and founder of Honey Be Bold. This show is all about helping you build the most successful and fulfilling business possible so you can make a bigger impact in the world. Let's dive in. You are passionate about teaching women to take up more space by building wealth. This is something that we talked about when we chatted before. Can you talk a bit more about this and why this mission is so important to you?
Absolutely. I think for so many women, we just aren't talked to about money and what it can represent to us. And so I think the more you know, the better you can make decisions, and using your money as a tool to best serve you is just a narrative we don't hear a lot about. I think for so many people, we spend our time thinking about, well, how do I pay my bills? And how do I save up for retirement? Or maybe, how do I give my kids more opportunities than I did or that I ever had? But we don't think about it even broader than that. And I think that's what's so cool and powerful about female entrepreneurs is that I think, again, generalizing, but so many of us want to give back and really leave an impact and kind of leave a mark on the world. I think it's also part of the way the world works. The more money you have, unfortunately and fortunately, in some ways, the more money you have, the louder your voice tends to be. And so I think if you can figure out a way to really utilize your money and figure out how to use it as a tool that you can now wield to dream up your own big life in whatever way that looks, that's so incredible. And for me, kind of selfishly, that's almost part of what I would consider my impact to the world is how do I help you have a bigger impact in the world? And even though your impact's not directly tied to me, I like to think there's a little indirect tie, which is just so cool to be a part of, even if it's a small piece.
Yeah, I relate to that so much because I say that all the time that my role, obviously, I'm not helping my clients with the money side of things, but I'm helping them grow their businesses through their content marketing, their branding, their websites. What's so exciting for me is when I'm able to work with women who are doing very meaningful and impactful work. And I have some part in that impact. So I totally relate to that. The idea of it takes a village, I think so applies to entrepreneurship as well. We have all these people that support us, whether we think about it that way or not, and whether we're paying someone money or not to support us. There's so many touch points that we have throughout our experience of entrepreneurship that really allow us to make the biggest impact.
Yeah, I'd agree. And exactly to your point of having that support system, having that village, whether it's intentional or paid for or not, at least I'll speak personally for me. I know that while I'm so passionate about work, it's also very easy to lose myself in my work. And if I really get into a good work zone, I recognize that other things are maybe slipping through the cracks. And the only way they don't slip through the cracks is because I have then a very amazing supportive husband who can pick up the slack at home, who allows me to work longer hours when it makes sense, having other family and mentors to help hold you accountable and things like that. You really can't do it all on your own. And I think, unfortunately, with so much of social media, there is this constant comparison. And because of that, so many people, I think, especially women, put this on ourselves of like, we should be able to do everything, because that is what we've always been told, is that we should have it all and we should want to have it all and we should be able to be it all. And that's just not true, at least not all the time. I definitely think there's seasons of life where you might be leaning more into work and other seasons where you're maybe leaning more into yourself or maybe leaning more into family. And I think having that support system, whether family or friends, whether paid for, professional support as well, that's the only way you continue to stay on track, I think, for all these different big goals that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. When we talk about the idea of wealth building, I think a lot of people immediately associate that with already being wealthy, right? You have a wealthy family that you come from, and you have a nest egg that you got as an inheritance from your grandfather or whatever. And now I have wealth that I can build off of. How do you approach wealth building for regular people who are just trying to get by? Is that even attainable, and what does it look like?
Yes. Oh, I'm so glad you brought this up, because I talk about this all the time. That if you know anything about my background, I did not come from money. I grew up in a trailer park. That's how not from money I am. So I say this all the time, that I am proof that you do not have to come from money to learn how to be great with it. And what so many people don't realize is that I think they believe managing your money or being good with it is just something that some people have this innate skill and others don't. And if you don't have that innate skill, you'll just never be good with it. And that's not true at all. It's 100% something that can be taught and can be improved upon with practice. I would actually say that people who inherit money generally are, for the most part, the worst with it, because they didn't have to learn some of the hard lessons that we had to learn, because so much of it, when you don't come from it, you're learning through trial and error. I very often will work with what I refer to as first generation wealth builders, because they're people that are breaking these generational patterns and now are putting themselves into different economic demographics than what they grew up in. And it does mean that maybe the advice you heard growing up, if you heard any at all, probably doesn't cut it for what you're trying to build on your own. And so that's where it's important to seek out other people who are doing it and taking advice from people who are building those lives that you are wanting to emulate. But I would say, first and foremost, for more of a practical tip, you need to understand what you have coming in, what you have going out. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean you have to budget, because that's such a scary word for so many people. And I will admit that I am actually a financial professional who is not a big fan of budgeting.
Really?
Yeah. And I think so many people that it surprises them, but I think of budgeting almost like crash dieting. You're really motivated for a little bit, especially around a new year where you're like, okay, new year, new me, I'm finally going to do this thing. And you're highly motivated, and that motivation lasts a couple weeks. And then you realize, like, wow, this is really hard. I feel really deprived. I don't enjoy this. I'm miserable. And so in turn, you completely stop.
Totally makes sense.
That dieting analogy ties in really well with budgeting. For me, I'm a big proponent of, like, once you know better, you can do better. And the knowing better comes from understanding and kind of quantifying what your goals are. So if you can take this big goal that you have and try to put some numbers to it, do a little bit of math, and then back into, based off of how long you want it to take to reach that goal, if you can try to then back into what it takes for you today to get on track for that goal, once you know that number, I think people naturally start making some shifts in their monthly cash flow. But up until that, it's really hard to stay motivated to try to build wealth or try to start savings. If you're starting from scratch, when you don't understand what it represents. If you're
Yeah.
just, well, I just need to save because someone told me I should do that, that's not exciting and that's not fun. And your motivation's only going to carry you so far. And so I do think there's a really important piece of quantifying that and having that goal in mind for yourself. And it also frees you up and can act as a permission slip. I think this feels very counterintuitive for people, that by having a financial plan and by knowing the numbers that you need to hit, it can actually create more freedom for you, because once you're on track for those savings goals, whatever you have else left over, go spend it. Go do the fun thing. Go book the
Yeah.
trip. It's your permission slip to do that, ideally, then without the guilt or without the stress, because you're not concerned about how you're spending your money and whether or not that's negatively impacting your other goals, because you already know what it takes.
Yeah, this wasn't even one of the questions I was going to ask, but I'm curious to always talk about savings in terms of saving for retirement. But I wonder if that is a less motivating goal for people who are maybe younger and it feels like this far away thing that's not so tangible. But if I say, okay, we have to save for retirement, right? Like everyone has to do that. But okay, I'm saving for retirement, but I'm also saving for something that I can enjoy now. Is that a more motivating goal for people to be reaching for?
Absolutely. For the most part, in my experience, everyone has multiple goals.
Yeah.
And very often they're kind of conflicting because, yes, to your point, you want to save for retirement, and it can be hard to maintain your motivation to save for retirement because it is so far away. I think there's so many unknowns around it because you're trying to plan for something that maybe is a couple decades away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where working with someone who can help you see the bigger picture and, again, kind of quantify it. I'm always bringing numbers back to today, because people get really caught up trying to think about, how do I know what I need in 20 years for an income? Well, I can help you figure that out. Again, the point is we're going to continue to hone in on that and get more and more specific as we get closer. But again, if you can tie it back to now, even though it's a long-term savings goal, I think that helps. But yes, there's always other short-term goals, whether it's saving up for a new house or maybe it's a car, helping you figure out how much to put down and what can you afford on a monthly basis and where down payment money, where's that coming from?
Mm-hmm.
Or even things like travel. I have had so many conversations with people in the last handful of months around the importance of travel. And for me, I just consider it another line item in our goals. That, okay, well, if you want to do 10 grand a year of travel, then this is what we need to save up for. And let's have this be a fluid part of your plan where we know you build up this kind of travel amount, go buy your flights and book your hotels. And now we've kind of drained that. Okay, well, now it's our turn. We've got to turn that faucet back on, build that back up, book your trips again. And so travel for me is incredibly important. I'm actually heading to Thailand for 2 weeks here in 3 days.
Oh, wow.
So yeah. And I think as long as you're aware of those goals, again, if you can quantify everything, then it's just going to come down to your priority order.
Yeah.
And I never view it as my job to judge what your preferences are, what your priorities are, but it's my job to help you put the math to it and help you make informed decisions. And if travel is a higher priority for you than, say, retirement, that's okay. I just want you to understand that maybe saving less towards retirement might mean retirement gets pushed out a little bit longer.
Right.
Or maybe it means it's a little less that you have to spend in retirement. And as long as you're informed and okay with that decision, then go travel.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's really going to come down to your personal preference of what's most important to you. But yeah, I want to build in fun stuff for every client because you will be more motivated to continue. And life's too short to not do the fun stuff along the way.
Amen. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short break. Quick question, fellow female entrepreneur. Is your messaging actually doing its job? attracting the right people and making them stop in their tracks and say, wow, I must work with her. And most importantly, getting them to actually take action on that. If you're making a not so sure face right now, then it's time for a messaging glow up. My free mini course, 3 Days to Bold Messaging That Converts, will help you refine your messaging so you can attract more of those clients you dream about without second guessing every word you write. Oh, and did I mention you'll get personalized feedback from me too? Yep, all for free. Snag your spot at honeybeebold.com/free. That's honeybebold.com/free. And let's make your messaging work for you instead of against you. All right, let's get back to the episode. What are the first most important steps that female entrepreneurs can take right now to begin building wealth, even if they feel like they don't have much to invest right now? What are those first essential steps?
Yeah, I would say you need to understand what accounts you even have, because oftentimes if you're a career changer and maybe it's a little later on in life and now you're building this business, if you've worked at other places, maybe you already have some investment accounts. So I think for your own sake, it's important to understand what you have, what type of account it is, the corresponding tax characteristics to it. It'll also help you determine whether or not you can continue to invest in that account. Because as an entrepreneur, you now have different, if we're going to talk retirement, you now have different retirement accounts that you have access to. And so looking at what those are, I think also connecting with a CPA, I would almost say that's probably more important than connecting with a financial planner. Connect with a CPA first and foremost, get a good handle on what your taxes look like, whether you're paying quarterly taxes. I try to work with my business owner clients in making sure that we're coordinating with the CPA to say, okay, here's what your taxes are going to look like. Do we have the monthly cash flow to save up for those on a quarterly basis so you're paying your tax estimates? If we can't do that, or it's too much to try to do that, can we at least set aside a certain amount from every single invoice that you get paid, knowing that some months that number is going to be really little and in other months it might be quite large, but that's part of what I would aim for, is trying to get a good handle on taxes, understand what accounts you even have and the corresponding taxes. Because again, from the CPA and the financial professional, they'll be able to help you figure out come tax time, okay, well, you could do X amount more into this retirement account. Here's now the impact of how it reduces your taxable income. Mm-hmm. But you need to know what your taxes are, and you need to know your accounts first and foremost. And at the very least, try to save some amount. I always suggest start small, maybe 5% of everything that comes in. You don't need to jump all the way to 15, 20%. But if you can start small, at this point, it's more about building up that habit and trying to just get used to that money. And if you can even just allocate it in a different savings account and then figure out come tax time, maybe what makes the most sense for where it should go, just having that money gives you that choice now that you get to make.
Yeah, I always think, $100 nowadays is such a small amount of money. Obviously, there are people for whom $100 is not nothing, but I think that for most of us who are running businesses, we're middle class, we're living a pretty high standard of living, and $100 is not a huge amount of money. If you think about taking $100 that maybe you would spend on something that you don't necessarily need right now, and yes, we want the fun stuff, but if you could just allocate $100 a month to savings, that feels very achievable for most people. And it's a great starting point.
And the sooner you start, the less you need to save out of your own pocket to hit the same dollar amount goal. And so many people wait until they either feel like it's a more meaningful amount, or maybe they're waiting because they want to pay down some debt first. And if you can start small, your $100 example is great. It might not feel super meaningful, but it absolutely builds on itself and continues to grow. And time really is your greatest asset when it comes to building wealth. It's not to say if you have waited that there's no chance. It just means there's going to be a little bit more of a financial burden on you for you to make sure that then you're saving. Anyone that's listening, I would encourage you, like, start as soon as you can. I mean, if it's $50 a month, if it's $100 a month, if it's a couple hundred, it absolutely adds up and grows on itself. Take advantage of that compound interest, because we talk about this idea of compound interest, and so often people think about it only in terms of the negative of debt.
Yeah.
And they go, okay, I want to pay down my debt because I'm getting all this interest and I have to pay for it. Absolutely. That is an important part of your overall finances, is having a tactical game plan to handle the debt. But at the same time, compound interest can also work for you. And it means less out of your own pocket that you need to save to end up at the same goal. So recognize compound interest goes both ways. Yes, it can kind of hurt you a little bit on the debt, but it can also do you some huge favors in the long term. So sooner you start, the better you'll be.
Yeah. Do you have any favorite tools or resources that you recommend for women who are just starting on this journey?
It's a little harder for me to answer that, just because some of my favorite tools are, things that I can use because of, my connections that aren't necessarily open to the public. So I want to provide something that's more helpful to everybody. I think it's more around having a system of what works for you and just knowing yourself. Some people just love Excel and they track things in there, and that feels good. Personally, I'm not a fan of that. I have my own tracking of, even, pending business and like things like that. I'm an entrepreneur as well. So I'm trying to track follow-ups and next time I need to meet with clients and things like that. I don't enjoy tracking that in Excel because it's something manually that I have to do.
Yeah.
But if you're someone that you work well that way, then great. Like, it's find a system that works for you. A lot of people use QuickBooks. Mint.com, I think it recently just got bought out, but that was another one. There's a lot of different personal kind of financial websites that can act almost as a dashboard to see everything that you have. I personally like things that will track it for you so that you're not manually having to go in and do all the work. And I'm not even saying you have to look at it constantly, but even if it's a monthly or even a quarterly basis, just to have an idea of what you're spending, where it's going. I find for most people, there can be some eye-opening areas where they didn't realize how much money they were spending.
Yeah.
And that might be if you don't have enough cash flow to hit those savings goals that we were talking about earlier. That's then when I start to go back and look at, okay, well, how much are we spending? Are there areas where it's not as high of a priority for you to maybe go, can't even come up with an example because I don't want to throw out the Starbucks coffee example, because I'm like, your $5 coffee is not making or breaking your wealth. It's not. Like, I hate that example that we get from older generations.
Yeah.
So it needs to be more meaningful than that. But I have found, I work with a lot of attorneys, and one thing that creeped up on them was like their dry cleaning bill, where you're like, you didn't even think about it. And you're like, yeah, that could be an extra $250, $300 a month sometimes for people. That's more meaningful than your $5 cup of coffee.
Definitely. Yeah.
So if you can find things like that, we're like, okay, maybe that's just something to note and be aware of. For me, I'm all around awareness, because I think once you're aware, then you can start to be more intentional. But you can't be intentional about things if you don't know about them yet.
I think it's interesting, like you said earlier, that you're not a fan of budgets, and your explanation for that totally makes sense. One thing that I think is a little bit different is my husband and I actually do budget, but that's something that we've been doing for, I don't even know, 10 plus years. But the biggest thing that we did was we started, again, probably 10, 12 years ago, we track everything that we spend. And most people, I think, don't necessarily need to continue that forever. My husband is a little bit OCD about it, but that's okay.
If it works for you guys, again, you found a system.
Yes.
It works. All good.
we love him anyway. I think that when we started doing that, it was such an eye-opening exercise, because you really don't know where your money is going unless you actually look at it and say, okay, what am I spending on what? And we actually recently went through an exercise where, yeah, we were tracking what we spent, but we weren't necessarily getting granular on the categories of expenses. And so we recently went back and said, okay, let's let's actually break this down a little bit and see, where are we spending money. So my husband is a chocolate aficionado. I kid you
Okay.
not. We now have a line item in our budget for very fancy chocolate. And when we broke it down, I was like, listen, I think we need to make an intervention here. Like, can we switch to a slightly less fancy chocolate? Because it's ridiculous how much money we are spending on this every year. And
Funny.
so that was a change that we made when we had to make some cutbacks in our budget. But sometimes it, like, that's an extreme example, but sometimes it can be really eye-opening to just like say, okay, where is my money going exactly?
Yeah. Absolutely. I know my husband, every time he'd go to the gas station to fill up his car, he'd go in and get like a soda and something else. And again, it's minuscule like dollar
Yeah.
amounts. It was more that when you added it up, and I didn't really care. I was never like, okay, you need to change this. It was more almost just like a joke now that we'll refer to that like, oh, did you get your Mountain Dew? We'll see it. I mean, I recognize I can speak from a place of privilege at this point because I've been now in this career almost 15 years. So I'm past the hustle part of maybe tracking things if you need to. And so I would hope that people, hopefully that's a short amount of
Yes.
time that most people are in that space and you're beyond that. And now if you're looking to go, okay, I do have money coming in. And for most of my clients, I'm not working in that budgeting space because we do have the money. It's more around how can we most efficiently use this? We've
Right.
got all these different goals that we want to tackle, and this is the money that we have coming in, and we just don't know the best places to put things. So some of the advice earlier was more for people, really just starting out, but I think it still all applies. The dollar amount examples that we use probably just get bigger for you, but it's the main key is just you've got to start somewhere, and starting sooner will help you out in the long run. And then I always try to coach people too that every year try to up what you're saving.
Yeah.
So it doesn't need to be these huge jumps. And I think that's what kind of terrifies people a little bit around money, not only just all the jargon and all the unknown, because it can be a pretty overwhelming and intimidating topic for a lot of people, not even factoring in like the emotional component to it as well. But I think so many people think that when they try to get serious around managing their finances or setting themselves up for financial success, that they think it's going to be these huge, big block like changes in their entire life. It doesn't have to be. It can be small changes that just every year you continue to grow on the existing habits that you have. So every year, like that's how you're going to eventually get to all those savings goals. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. It can be start small and then grow on it every single year until you get to where you need to be.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I want to return for a minute to the idea that we started this conversation with about the impact that we can have when we take these steps, right? We've talked a lot in this conversation about practical steps that people can take to start changing their financial situation and building wealth. And I want to talk a little bit more about this idea of impact, because I think that a lot of people, but I think a lot of women in particular, might have an idea that wealth has a negative connotation in a lot of ways, right? That there's a resistance sometimes to building wealth because we're unfortunately exposed to a lot of people of wealth who are not doing the best things with their money, right? So can you talk to me a little bit about how do we change that mindset? How do we change that narrative?
Absolutely. I think if you can change your mindset more to think about what money can represent, it's not exciting for me. And I think what we hear often are the people that want to have more money just for the sake of having more money. And that doesn't resonate with me. I don't relate to that. And I think a lot of women, that doesn't resonate with them either. But if you can change your mentality around this goal of just trying to have more money and instead thinking about what money represents to you, because money can mean more freedom. It can mean maybe expansion in your business to bring on additional people in your team. And it's like, well, great. Now you're helping support someone else's family as well. Like that's just one small step out. But it can also mean more opportunities and more choice, more flexibility. And so I think you have to start almost personally with what money means to you. When I'm meeting with a new prospective client, I ask them to fill in the blank of like, money is. and I leave it blank. And it's so eye-opening how people respond to this, because I would say for a lot of women, the answer is something along the lines of a necessary evil.
Mm,
And I'm like, well, that's a powerful thought that's going to stick with you.
yeah.
And if you continue to think it's this necessary evil, it's such a self-limiting belief for yourself and for your practice or for your business, and a limiting belief even for those around you, that I would love for all of us to step into this role more thinking about, yes, money is a byproduct of success and here's everything that I get to do with it, and start to think about those things. I just crossed off. I have a physical bucket list that I wrote out when I was in college. I still have
Wow.
this. And one of my bucket list items was to create a scholarship fund. I'm a first generation college student. And so for me, it's even back in college, it was something that I wanted to eventually give back. And I had grand ideas of maybe writing a children's book to teach them about money and what you can do with it, and like spending and saving and philanthropic kind of giving it away. And that I've just kind of been stuck on that. It's a lot
Yeah.
harder than I thought to come up with a publisher and illustrator and all these things. There were a lot of things
Mm-hmm.
in my way. And for whatever reason, the last couple months of last year, it was weighing on me that I thought, I don't need to wait to do that. I can just create the scholarship fund now. And I'm
Wow.
starting small, but still, it's something that I can officially check off my list that I'm excited about. So again, kind of going back to our motivation, find something that you're excited about or find something that you're passionate about. Because the truth very often is, when you have more money, you have more of an impact.
Yeah.
And so don't lessen yourself because it might feel icky or gross, or like, oh, I have all this money and now somehow I'm like thinking about what I have to pay in taxes and that doesn't feel like who I used to be. That's okay. Figure out what you're passionate about or what causes you're passionate about, or create something of your own that you're
Yeah.
passionate about, and use that to be not only the example maybe that you would have wanted for yourself, but to be that example for others, so that as women, we can continue to step into this zone. Because I think when we come together, we can do amazing things, but you generally need money to do a lot of it.
Yeah. I love that. I love everything you just said, especially this idea of, you creating this scholarship fund. The amount of things that are available to us to do just increases exponentially the more money that we have. It's, fortunate or unfortunate. Maybe I shouldn't say unfortunately, right? I think that that's actually a really key shift that you just called out. Because I often say I work with business owners who exist for more than just making money, right? And we all need to make money. This is how I usually phrase it. But now I'm thinking maybe I need to rephrase that a little bit, because money allows us to do so much, right? And it allows us to have that impact. And when we have things that we really care about, and we all have things that we care about, we all have an impact that we wish we could make in the world. And that is available to us on whatever scale, right? It could be on a small scale, but we really have that available to us the more we're able to build that wealth. So I love that. Thank you so much for taking the time. This was such a great conversation, and I think you shared so many practical tips and so many great ways to reframe how we think about money. Tell us where we can find you. Where can people find you if they're interested in working with you? Where do you hang out online?
Absolutely. Well, I think things have changed a lot too. I'm even hearing about new social media platforms that I have not joined just yet, but maybe you'll find me in some new ones. But LinkedIn really is my main place where I'm hanging out. I don't know about you, but I just tend to feel the best when I spend my time on there,
Yeah.
never leaving there like feeling gross or stuck in comparison. So LinkedIn for sure. I'm very Googleable is what I say, because whether it's Kristin Printon, my last name, or Kristin Brandley Printon, I moved my maiden name to my middle name. I'm the only one out there. So very easy to find me. You can always Google. I am on Instagram at Moxie underscore Kristinspiration. That's kind of my hashtag. That's actually what my scholarship fund is called too, is
I love that.
Kristinspiration. So that started years ago on LinkedIn of, kind of just having my own specific hashtag that you could find all my content tied to that. And I've just taken it and run with it. But I also wanted to thank you too for having me on. I love these kinds of conversations. And the more we can empower women, especially around their money, because It is a powerful tool that you absolutely can use. So I would encourage every woman listening, like, don't shy away from it. So I'm just grateful to have this opportunity to chat with you as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really love this idea that the wealth we build is not just for the sake of building wealth, right? It's about the impact that we can make on ourselves, our self fulfillment, our families, our communities, and the world at large, right? We can make an impact in so many ways. And our businesses really are tools, catalysts for allowing us to make that impact. I think you know by now that my approach to entrepreneurship is very steeped in values, right? And the values that drive us as business owners. And when you can really get in touch with those deep, meaningful values, that is going to allow you to not only build a business that is speaking directly to the needs of your ideal clients in a very meaningful, connected way, it also allows us to really be thinking about what is the impact that I want to make on the world? How can I, in my own way, it doesn't even have to be in a big way, it can be in these small micro ways. How can I make a bigger impact in the way that I can on the world? And I think that Kristin's example of starting this scholarship fund is such a perfect way to encapsulate really understanding what's important to you and how can you achieve that. You know, one of the reasons that I focus so much on the values-based branding and the messaging that's coming out of your brand is that that is what's going to allow you to connect in a very meaningful way to your ideal clients, to the people that you want to help, that you want to work with. And that's going to, in turn, allow your business to grow. And that's going to, in turn, allow you to build wealth. And that, in turn, is going to allow you to make a bigger impact. So it starts with your messaging, right? It's this tiny little thing that feels insignificant. Just like Kristin was talking about, that if you save $20 a month or $50 a month or $100 a month, it feels insignificant, but it adds up over time. And the same thing, we start with this little spark. We start with this spark of really dialing in our messaging, getting really clear on what it is that we want to say and how we want to say it, and how we can connect our deep inner values, our unique magic, right? The thing that really makes us stand out as a brand with the very specific needs of your clients, those pain points that they're facing. And when you can find a way through your messaging to connect those, you're going to see the impacts grow and grow and grow and grow. Thanks for tuning in today, and let's go make a bigger impact in the world. All right, beautiful human, that's it for today's show. This show is brought to you by my company, Honey Be Bold, with music by Shmookalele. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe on your podcast listening platform of choice. And if you can take 5 seconds to rate and review us, it really helps the show grow. And before you go, if you're struggling to attract and convert your dream clients, be sure to check out my free mini course, 3 Days to Bold Messaging That Converts, and you'll get personalized feedback from me on how to nail your messaging every time. Head on over to honeybebold.com/free. That's honeybebold.com/FREE to sign up. Thanks for listening.